What inspired you to write a steampunk book?
Actually, it's kind of a funny story. The inspiration came from a trip to the eye doctor. I just went in for an exam, and it being the 21st century, I kind of expected that the equipment would be, computers and what have you. But instead, the doctor pulled down this giant contraption that was all levers and lenses, and it just looked like something out of a science fiction novel, and I just thought it would be so interesting to write a book that was full of gadgets like that. And then I also, my background prior to becoming a novelist is as a professor of history, and so I'm very, very interested in early history, particularly the history of colonies and empires in the 19th century. And I wondered what it would be like to write a history where the American Revolution failed, because that's considered such an important moment in history, but also for American identity itself. So I wondered, if you took that big piece away, then what does everything else start to look like?
Had you always wanted to write a book set during the American Revolution?
Actually, I would say I hadn't always wanted to, but once I began thinking about where I would want to set a steampunk novel, because most steampunk takes place either in the late 19th century or sometimes even into the early 20th century. But I didn't want to travel ground that other authors had already done, and because my area of specialization in history is much earlier, I decided I really wanted to take it back, to say, like, what if we try to look at a steampunk world that is well before it's usually encountered, and then the American Revolution as a centerpiece just seemed like a really great place to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which character do you identify with the most?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are so many of them in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit more about the process of creating those characters?
The characters that's my absolute favorite part of writing the book, is getting to know the characters, and they're always surprising. And what I found in every single book I've written, there's always a character who I think is going to play a minor role and then just takes over the book and becomes my favorite character. And in The Inventor's Secret, it's Lynette. Lynette just, she showed up, and I'm like, she's going to be just kind of fun, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, she's amazing! You're my favorite character, and I want her to be in every scene. But because she's a supporting character, she can't actually be in every scene, but I definitely found myself very drawn to her mischievous personality, and she's very brave, but she's very sly. And I think, I wouldn't say I necessarily relate to her the most, but I want to be her. I think she has all sorts of really cool traits that I like to be part of. I really enjoyed the quirkiness of the characters. I feel like I got to create much more unusual characters in The Inventor's Secret. For example, Birch the Tinker, who is essential to creating the weapons and gear that they need, but also has a penchant for blowing things up by accident. Pip, who wants to be his apprentice, but who also is like best friends with Scoff, so she lets him try all his concoctions on her, so her hair is always turning different colors. And then Scoff, who really thinks he's going to save the world with his different potions, but everybody's afraid he's gonna be poisoned by them. So I think that there's a lot more playfulness to this series than what I'd written before, and I really, really enjoy that.
If you had to describe The Inventor's Secret in 3 words, what would they be? And you can't use steampunk, revolution, or Uchronia.
Oh, those are very good parameters. Okay, I would say
This is a good one you can edit, so that's or you just have me sitting in there going, no problem.
I would say gregarious, thrilling, and you can't, just cheating. That's cheating.
That's cheating.
No, that's cheating. But adventurous is a very good word. But I would say,
You can go with this one if you want.
So what did I say? I said gregarious. What was the second?
You said gregarious.
Thrilling.
Thrilling.
And I'll say captivating.
This is something that I thought maybe I'm wrong, but you added a mythological aspect
Yes.
to the book.
Yes.
And I feel like steampunk is very like mathematics and science and that kind of stuff. And so I wondered why you wanted to associate the two when they don't always go together on a logical level.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I'm really glad you asked because I don't get asked that often. And the mythology part is really important to me in terms of the world. So one of my very favorite books is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And it is not in and of itself a steampunk novel. Adherents to the steampunk, both writers of the genre and also people who are into the scene, because steampunk involves a lot of people who do the live action role playing and build their own steampunk devices and that sort of thing. It's a really interesting community. And they point to Mary Shelley as kind of like a foundational figure in the idea of the steampunk genre. And, the alternate title for Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. And it really is a morality tale about when humans try to exceed their boundaries and what the price of that is and what our relationship to the divine is and where its limits might exist. And in the 19th century, culturally, there was a big neoclassical movement. So if you look at paintings of that time period and even the style of dress, it very much harkens to Greek and Roman mythology and style, and a lot of people who had their portraits painted in that time had themselves painted as kind of Greek and Roman figures. And so I decided to take the love of the neoclassical a step further and to add in the idea that European cultures had actually reintroduced the Greek pantheon as part of their culture and part of their religion. And I wanted to have Athena and Hephaestus be the two counterpoints of that because Athena is not only a goddess of war, but she's also a goddess of craft and particularly women's mysteries. And then Hephaestus is a smith. He's the one who forges Zeus's lightning bolts and such. And so I actually thought they were really wonderful counterpoints of what steampunk is. They both the knowledge and the craft. And so to me, it was able to bring in an aspect of history that most people don't know, but also create a steampunk world that's not just about the devices, but that there's an entire philosophy behind it that's tied into neoclassicism.
Have you encountered any difficulties writing this intricate story?
I think that the most difficult thing is being patient, and this is true for me in all my books, because when I'm writing a story, I'm just so caught up and I want to just get to the adventure and see what's happening, and because there are so many moving parts in the story, I have to make sure nothing gets left behind. And also because as a writer, I don't plot, so I would probably be much aided by creating some sort of chart for myself to make sure I'm not missing anything, but it goes against my process. So in this case, it really helps me that I have a wonderful editor. So if I turn in a draft to her and she said, "This is great, Andrea, but what about this, this, and this?" I'm like, "Oh, that's right. I really should put that stuff in there." So, I think it's more the, missing things that I wanted to be there, but then somehow got lost along the way because I got distracted by other things that are happening.
Can you tell us more about book 2?
Yes. So the title of book 2 is The Conjurer's Riddle, and it will be published in the States in November. And it really, it plants Charlotte. Charlotte is already kind of the central character, but she really has to step into a leadership role at this point because I do not want to give away what has happened to the catacombs. Obviously, the conclusion of Inventor's Secret, things are very up in the air about what the fate of that location has been and the people who were there. So she really has to take charge in a way that she hasn't before, but she finds that she is well suited to being a leader, even though it carries a lot of challenges with it. You also move away from the coast and to the Mississippi area, and most of the book takes place in New Orleans, and New Orleans is actually held by the French Empire in the setting, so it was really, really fun for me to get to create this unique city, and it's not floating the way New York is, but it's built on a series of platforms because of the flooding that happens in the bayous, and there's because the British Air Navy is so powerful, you're not allowed to have there's a no-fly zone all around New Orleans, so they're much more reliant on ships. So I kind of got to explore the wild riverways and the Mississippi, and there's this amazing French pirate. He's so amazing, I just love him. His name is Jean-Baptiste Lachance, and he's so handsome and wonderful, and I'm just excited for everybody to read him because he's my book crush of this series for sure.
You put a lot of responsibility on teenagers.
Yes.
Why this choice?
Well, in this particular case, the children of revolutionaries really have been, I wouldn't say they've been abandoned because the system of the catacombs and other places, basically safe spaces that have been created for the children of revolutionaries are meant to give them a way to grow up and learn together in a space that's protected from the warfare that's going on. But at the same time, because they're away from their parents and other adults, they're forced to become self-reliant a lot sooner. And I think there were a couple of reasons that I wanted to do that. One is that in every series that I write, the young adults, I'm very interested in the idea of coming of age, so that, what is the point at which you go from being, dependent on others to finding yourself. That's very important. But in this case, that's made even more extreme by the situation that's going on. And I think that what I wanted to do, and this theme comes up a lot more in the second book, is to explore the idea of the cost of war. So the fact that, the revolution is being presented as something that, is worth sacrificing everything for, but you start to see the real cost of what does it mean, to have children who are basically orphaned. What is it like when they are, reintroduced to the world and the people who are fighting for this great cause? Do they feel the sort of allegiance to it that they are raised to feel, or do they start to see flaws in the system? So that's sort of the...
Okay. So you co-wrote a book with David Levitin.
Oh, yes, it was
it's gonna be published in France very soon.
Yes.
Not Lumens, but another publisher. I have a question for this. Two questions, actually.
Yes.
Will there be a sequel to the book?
Okay, that's a question. That is maybe. The answer is maybe. David and I have talked about a sequel, but right now we are both committed to other projects. Okay. And so in the meantime, we are just kind of like letting it be a possibility in the background. The book has been optioned by Warner Brothers for a film. And yeah, so we're really hopeful that will happen. An option is just a first stage in many towards what we could. But if that project does go forward, I think that we would likely try to write the second book to time with the release of the movie. So I think we're kind of just waiting to see there. Okay. Yeah.
Because I'm waiting for...
Oh, no, thanks. I know. You're not the only person who's asked that, and I think David and I both feel very guilty.
And I wanted to know, how is it to write a book with another writer, and in particular David Levitin, who is one of my favorite writers, actually. Well,
yeah, he's just, he's one of my best friends and a wonderful human being. So it was a great joy to write with David. It was we had, our co-writing thing was very different than I think, like you mentioned before, Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, who actually literally write together, as do Cassie Clare and Holly Black with their new Iron Trial series. They literally write in the same space. David and I wrote from alternating perspectives. So he wrote all of the chapters from Stephen's perspective, and I wrote all the chapters from Elizabeth's perspectives. And when we were writing the book, I was living in Minneapolis and he was living in New York, and we literally emailed each other chapters. So he emailed me chapter 1, I read it, and then I emailed him back chapter 2. And we didn't talk about it at all. It was like basically novel writing through letter exchange. But it was really, really fun to do that way. And David and I are both very independent, and as I mentioned before, I don't plot. Neither does he. So our writing styles melded very, very well, and it all came out good. We did meet once to make sure we both thought the book was going to end the same way, and we did. So that was fortunate.
Any other writing project on the table?
There's nothing official at the moment, but I am right now kind of doing a project for myself on the side that is about murder mysteries along the kind of pioneer trail of the American West. And I think that really my interest in doing that sprung out from The Inventor's Secret, particularly as I was writing the second book. I ended up reading a lot about early settlements along the Mississippi, and just was reminded about how much I'm interested in kind of the mystique of the Old West in American culture, and that I really haven't seen many young adult stories set in that time period. And I also, because I don't plot, a murder mystery to me is a big challenge, because it really will force me to plot, and so I feel like I'm throwing this gauntlet at myself to say, all right, if I want to write this kind of book, I probably will have to plot, so I'm gonna push myself out of my comfort zone. So.
Okay. Do you want to say something else to your French readers?
Well, I would just to say thank you so much, merci beaucoup, for your wonderful enthusiasm and for being such great readers. Every time I visit France, I'm impressed by the level of interest in reading and also just the joy that readers take in getting to know the worlds and the characters. So it's just an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for being here and answering the questions then.
Well, thank you.
Nous voici avec l'éditrice de chez Lumen, et donc la question que j'aimerais vous poser, c'est pourquoi avoir choisi Le secret de l'inventeur? Qu'est-ce qui a poussé ce choix de l'adapter en français, qui vous a plu vraiment pour vous dire ce livre va marcher?
Alors, Le secret de l'inventeur, en le lisant, moi je suis une grande fan de fantasy et de science-fiction, en fait de tous les sous-genres littéraires, dès qu'il y a un peu d'aventure, dès qu'il y a un peu d'imaginaire, tout de suite ça m'emporte. Et en fait, en tombant sur Le secret de l'inventeur, c'était une trilogie qui avait du souffle, qui se passait dans un domaine qui était encore assez rarement exploré, puisque il y a un mouvement aux États-Unis, notamment par exemple Léviathan, etc. Il y a des choses qui ont été faites en steampunk, mais c'est en train d'émerger et il n'y en a pas encore beaucoup de publiés en France. Donc ça m'intéressait beaucoup d'ouvrir un nouveau segment et d'essayer de voir ce que ça donnerait le steampunk en France. Et puis surtout, donc, c'était un genre steampunk qu'Andrea Cremer avait particulièrement bien exécuté. C'est-à-dire que j'adorais tout ce qui était création du monde, effets de réel, et notamment tout ce qu'elle avait pu inventer. Elle avait des machines qui étaient très originales. Moi, c'est vrai qu'au moment où les personnages partent pour New York, et donc, attention spoiler, s'aperçoivent que la ville de New York est une ville flottante, qui est construite sur des étages, etc., avec toute une... donc, en fait, la hiérarchie qu'il peut y avoir dans la société, elle est incarnée dans les niveaux de la ville. Voilà, moi j'ai trouvé que, comme on dit en anglais, le world building était enthousiasmant, hyper bien fait. C'était vraiment l'aspect, la qualité de son esprit d'invention qui m'a vraiment convaincue. Voilà, et puis j'aimais bien aussi l'idée que ce soit pas en ce moment la Gaslam Fantasy, ça se passe beaucoup, ou le steampunk, ça se passe beaucoup en Angleterre. Donc les dames des crinolines, il y a quand même plein de choses qui font que c'est pas de la fantaisie à papa, il y a beaucoup d'action, ça ne s'arrête jamais, c'est du vrai young adulte. Mais chez Andrea, il y avait un truc en plus de tout ça, qu'elle sait très bien faire, c'est qu'elle avait choisi les États-Unis et pas l'Angleterre. Donc évidemment, il y a un empire anglais dans l'histoire. Évidemment, on a quand même nos repères, mais en même temps, elle a décidé de le placer au moment de la Révolution américaine, son histoire. Et moi, j'adore les États-Unis, j'y ai vécu, voilà, et je trouvais que c'était hyper original. Il y a beaucoup de choses, et notamment l'aspect mythologie grecque, le fait que ça se passe aux États-Unis, qui en faisait un steampunk hyper original. Et donc c'est ça qui m'a séduite.
D'accord. Et une petite question peut-être qui pourrait intéresser nos lecteurs, c'est quand est-ce qu'on peut attendre le deuxième livre en France?
Et alors le deuxième livre, puisqu'il sort à l'automne, en fait le 3 novembre, si ma mémoire est bonne, aux États-Unis, il va sortir au début de l'année prochaine, début 2016, peu de temps après, en France. Voilà.
Très bien. Eh ben merci beaucoup.
Merci.